One of the defining characteristics of the modern society in which we live, which is known as the postmodern era, is the extent of opportunity and choice available to us. In the past, even 20 or 30 years ago, choices were much more constrained by culture, tradition, and convention. And psychologists, as a whole, believe that this is a good thing. The more opportunity that we have, in theory at least, the more we can discover and choose a lifestyle and make choices that allow us to find and live into what is known as our true self. The more freedom, autonomy, and opportunity should equal the development of a true and authentic life, which can lead to greater mental, spiritual, and overall well-being. But, according to psychology today, lifestyle choices are not made in a social vacuum. The choices that we make are heavily influenced by our peers, our parents, and others in the communities that which we are affiliated. And this even happens in our churches. There is a growing pressure from cultural expectation and social norm, which of course vary by age, gender, and other socio-demographic conditions. Do you ever feel like there are just widely accepted cultural norms? And even in our modern era, that the social norm is that there should be no social norm at all, that each person should live out their personal liberty. Researchers at Harvard University have found that many people, even with all of those variety of options and opportunities available to us, and the prevailing acceptance of personal liberty in culture, still make lifestyle choices based on social expectations and the desire for external validation. This has led to the development of what psychologists, led by D.W. Winnicott, to the development of what is known as the false self. This is the mechanism that we use in order to fit into culture. In some cases, you feel as though you must put on this false self, this false version of you, which can feel like living a lie or wearing a mask, in order to fit in and make it in society. You want to get a good job? Well, go to college and get a degree. You want to look like you have it all together? Don't worry about the debt. Put it on the credit card and buy that thing you need to fit in. Everyone at your kid's school playing traveling soccer? Well, sign them up too. But it turns out that the more that you live into your false self, the person that you feel that you need to be in order to fit in, the poorer your mental health. So, what is our true self? How do we live into it? That is what we are going to explore over the next 4 weeks during this Orchard Church Missional Community Teaching series called Masks. We're going to tackle 4 masks or false selves that we wear in order to fit in culture. The mask of achievement, wealth, power, and image. And we'll do this through the lens of Jesus' teaching on old and new wineskins. In Luke 5, Jesus is being bombarded by questions from the Pharisees, which were the Jewish leaders in that time. They were challenging Jesus at any opportunity because he was a major disruption to the order that they have established, to the law. The law would say one thing, Jesus would do another. It wasn't that Jesus was against the law. He said himself that he came to not to abolish the law, but to fulfill it. No, Jesus himself was against hypocrisy. In Luke 5:33, the Pharisees were pointing out that John's disciples fast and pray. But his disciples, that's Jesus' disciples, go on eating and drinking. To which Jesus replied. He told them this parable, that's Jesus. No one tears a piece out of a new garment to patch an old one. Otherwise, they will have torn the new garment. And patch from the new will not match the old. And no one pours new wine into old wineskins. Otherwise, the new wine will burst the skins. The wine will run out, and the wineskins will be ruined. No, new wine must be poured into new wineskins. While this parable, this message, has multiple meanings, some of which were only relevant contextually to the people that Jesus was teaching to, What he's saying here, Jesus, is that when you learn something new or have a new identity, the old way stops fitting in with this new information or new identity. Said another way, once you have an identity in Jesus, the world and the flesh stops fitting into it. This is the false and true self from a spiritual perspective. Our false self is what we project out into the world, or rather, what the world tells us that we need to be in order to fit in. And to fit in, we put on a false self or a mask. And if our true self is our true identity in Jesus, there is a mismatch to this. We have a new identity, and we're trying to fit the world into it. And to be clear, the false self isn't all bad. We are living in this world even as Christ followers, after all, and there is some minimum level of fitting in that we need to do in order to have influence. But ultimately, the more we lean into our true self, putting the new wine into the new wineskin, so to speak, the more we will be fulfilled. Not by what the world thinks of us, but what by Jesus has made us to be. Today, we're going to talk about the mask, or the false self, of achievement. Before we dive in any further to the mask of achievement, I want to relieve some pressure. Achievement is not all bad. God has gifted us with a brain and a body and resources. He's given us spiritual gifts and wired us a certain way for our fulfillment, like we talked about in the Rule of Life teaching series. To achieve is not contrary to the teaching of Jesus, but it's a matter of priority, motivation, and idolatry. In the book of Genesis, people were growing and settling after the flood, the story from which we find Noah's Ark, and they moved to a place called Shinar. The Bible isn't specific as to how much time passes between the flood and where we pick up this story in Genesis 11, but scholars believe that somewhere between several generations and several centuries had passed between those two times. Either way, there would have been a memory of, hey, we just started over as a society. And this is what happens in Genesis 11, starting in verse 3. They, that's all the people, said to each other, "Come, let's make bricks and bake them thoroughly." They used brick instead of stone and tar for mortar. Then they said, "Come, let us build ourselves a city with a tower that reaches to the heavens, so that we may make a name for ourselves." There is a great level of mistrust by God's people here. They're basically saying, let's be our own God. Let's put our status equal to or above God's. I don't trust, or we don't trust, that He'll provide what we need, and He doesn't know what's best for us. They are striving to achieve something great that was not meant for them. Society and culture were growing and developing, yet they still believe the best thing is to accomplish is to build a tower all the way to heaven. Do you ever feel that way? That culture and even your family of origin will value you more if you do something great with your life or with your career. That there is a pressure to be something that you're not in order to prove your worth. Growing up, I felt a great deal of pressure to achieve and in sports and in school. Now, my parents never explicitly said that they needed me to be a great athlete or a great student. But in a household with a high-achieving athlete and my younger sister, I put a ton of pressure on myself to do both. I was an average or okay athlete. I like sports, but I found my way to achieve much easier in the classroom. I always got really good grades until I was in the 10th grade, until I didn't anymore. I felt the pressure of fitting in other ways, and so school fell by the wayside a bit. My parents were understandably disappointed in me. It wasn't because I didn't get all A's. In fact, I got much worse grades than that. But it's that I wasn't valuing my education or giving effort or living into the thing that I was actually gifted with. And that's the dichotomy in achievement. God has made us to learn and to grow and to make this world a place filled with His goodness. He says in the Bible that humans are to fill the earth and subdue it. We were given trees for fruit and plants and food, and as society has matured, We've gained knowledge and made great strides in achievement. But there must be a balance in all of this. We can't make the earth or our own lives a vehicle to place ourselves above God, what He has given us and what He has made us to do. And I actually feel that pressure of achievement even today, as I help to lead Orchard Church. You might be surprised that the same pressure that you might have in your career exists in the church as well. Though our job is to lead people to Jesus and show them how to live a life that is honoring and glorifying of Him, there's a pressure to get ahead, to grow the biggest thing, and to quote unquote make it in the church world. I perceive a pressure to achieve something amazing, and the lie is that I have to do that all in my own power. That if I work harder, that somehow I am going to achieve more, and the world will think more of me. But even if that were possible, I would have helped to create something that left God behind, like the ancient people did when they built the Tower of Babel. It's not what I can do, but instead what God can do with me and through me. And that is godly achievement. To grow and to learn and to live into your best career that showcases your talents and your gifts and ultimately glorifies God, that is the achievement that we were created for. It's a matter of keeping everything in its proper place. God first, our own achievement second. One of the 10 Commandments is to have no other gods before God, and those are not just deities. That is to place anything that you value or honor above God's rightful place in the first position. You see, the world clearly values achievement, and your false self can easily choose to chase after this value. But the further you misalign your identity in Christ and the way God has wired you, the more you will ultimately feel lost or out of place in your life. The Franciscan priest Richard Rohr writes of this immortal diamond in his book about the true and false self. He says that our true self is like a diamond that is buried deep inside of us, and that must be searched for or uncovered and be separated from all the debris that is our false self that we've held on to from the life and the culture that it must tell us that we have to live. Our false self can bury our true self. And our job and achievement is to figure out and to uncover what our true self is, and to learn how to live that life out well. Our goal as followers of Jesus is to undertake the process of transformation to find that diamond inside of us, to live into our true self. And this is a process. We cannot die to our false self and destroy our mask overnight. But we can be transformed through seeking after Jesus, learning from Him, being with Him, and doing the things that He did, discovering our calling, gifting, and passion, and to achieve everything that He has created us to achieve. A final thought before we end this week's teaching. Key to our identity in Jesus is that we've already achieved everything that He's created us for, and we only need to receive and accept it. If anyone in history achieved a great deal, I'd say it was Jesus Himself. In just 3 years of public ministry, Jesus flipped religion on its head, healed hundreds, fed thousands, ended the curse of sin and death by dying on the cross for every person that ever lived and that ever will live, resurrected from the dead, and lives at the right hand of the Father, and started a 2,000-year movement that has reached and transformed millions of people. But the first thing that Jesus ever achieved was to submit to His identity. In Matthew 3, Jesus was baptized by John. As He comes out of the water, the Bible says the Spirit of God descended on Him like a dove. And a voice from heaven said, "This is my Son, whom I love. With Him I am well pleased." Jesus had yet achieved nothing, yet the Father loved Him and was well pleased with Him. Our prayer as we wrap up this week is that you achieve everything that you achieve in life comes from a place that before you did any of it, and even if you did none of it, that your Father in heaven loves you and is well pleased with you. We'll see you next week.